guests and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my big brother.
Still my favorite role.
Go on. We're very, very happy to be joined this evening. We have a very special guest live in the studio with us. If you're watching us on Facebook, you will see shortly. And thank you for joining us. And
thank
please,
you. Good
if
to
you'd
see
be
you.
so kind to hit that like and share button. And if you're listening on the radio, we are on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM in South Florida on WNN.
And join the conversation. You can give us a call live here at 888-565-1470, or you can also submit through that submit button on Facebook if you have a question or a comment.
So, we should jump right in, right?
Jump right in, yeah, because we are really excited. We have a very, very special guest tonight, very near and dear to my heart as well. Somebody I've had the great pleasure of working with the last several months, doing a lot of our work, training and offering programs to seniors, particularly around areas of sexuality and cannabis. And
who I've had the pleasure of meeting about 10 minutes ago.
That's right.
It is really, really a pleasure. Let's introduce Ann Goldberg.
Hi.
The Savvy Senior.
That's right. That's right.
And I have to ask right out of the gate, please tell me, what is a Savvy Senior?
Oh, well, it's very simple. I'm a Savvy Senior because, and as I just mentioned, I'm turning 67 on Monday, which is like, I don't understand that number. I only know that I've been on the planet that many years, but it bears no relevance to my personality. But a Savvy Senior, I know I'm old enough to have a past, and I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I get the feeling few of us were spectators in this life.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm young enough to have a future, and I do. And being a Savvy Senior, I know that I have control over that future, about how healthy it is, how vibrant it is, how purposeful it is, and how happy I am as in the end result of it. So, and sex is a part of that. Sexuality is such a part of that, and that's what makes what Larry talks about and what I talk about so interwoven, really. Because sexuality is part of the art of living longer, and that's what I talk about.
And that's why I also want you to talk about a little bit as well, as the author and developer of this program, and soon to be a publication, The Art of Living Longer. It's sort of a user manual for this human machine.
That's right.
So, and again, as that sense of well-being and sexuality, how that goes together, can you talk a little bit more about what you're doing with that? What is the art of living longer?
Well, it's not about living longer, because nobody knows their expiration date. You can do absolutely everything right, and God forbid, get hit by a car. So we don't know about longevity. We know about quality of life. We know about being happy. For me, that's what it's about. Because I figure if I'm happy, it doesn't really matter what my life circumstance is. As long as I'm happy, I'm okay. And happiness and health are very tied together. So I approach this because there's just so much information out there. I think about us as a species. So the question, you've had dogs. Would you ever give your dog chocolate, especially dark chocolate? Never. Why? Because canines can't digest dark chocolate. It's toxic to them. But humans can, and I do on a regular basis. So we're a species. We've had 200,000 years of evolution. And that evolution has included eating plant foods primarily, maybe 20 or 30% of meat, animal products, maybe that much, and movement. And moving our bodies is incredibly important. So the Art of Living Longer, the user manual, looks at the Homo sapien and says, what have we been doing for 200,000 years as a species? And then when did it change? 80 years ago?
Yeah. And it sure
200,000 years.
Changed dramatically, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's hubris of us to think that we can change the upkeep and maintenance that we do for this machine, this body that is a machine, and not have negative effects.
So when
in a nutshell.
Right. So this whole sort of template of well-being, and again, I like the way you have always qualified that the art of living longer is really not about living longer. It's about living better. It's about living more effectively. It's about living more intentionally. And just with a better quality of life.
And most importantly, it's about living with purpose. Because at the end of the day, people who have purpose and can have amyloid plaque in their brain and be asymptomatic, because that purpose drives them in such a way that they are able to bypass it somehow neurologically.
Right.
And
well, it's motivation, and I think it comes back around to that idea of well-being.
Yes.
Because that sense of purpose is really a sense of focus. It's a sense of connection to what they're doing, which is part of that sense of well-being and comfort. Right?
Yes.
When people are questioning and wondering, they don't feel they have a place, that's a lot of stress and anxiety.
That's terrible. When you think you don't matter, that's the biggest problem. And I suspect if they looked at mass shooters, they would find a pattern that these people never thought that they mattered to anyone. Yeah. And, I'm no therapist, I'm no expert, but mattering is so vitally important. That's the whole sexual connection.
Well, sure.
That whole relationship thing. It's knowing that you matter to one person.
That validation that we talk about.
We have a number of colleagues that use similar language that, to be in a sexless, dead relationship is like a more than a metaphorical death. It's like an existential death.
It's
when you see
roommates.
like affairs, people are so desperate to feel alive. There's it's a powerful force.
The sense of touch.
Connection.
We hugged, right? That hug
It was a yummy hug, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I specialize in hugs. I've learned from masters. And there's a way to hug that people don't really know, where you really hold on until you feel that person
You can feel a
exhale.
person's inhibition in their hug sometimes.
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, and those people, we just, but
We
there
just hug them
are
harder.
people. There are
And bring
times
them
when,
closer.
well, I'll get somebody in and I can feel them resisting and I won't let go. And all of a sudden they just go, and then I let go.
That's a good hug.
That's a good hug. And it changes their day. But that's touch.
Right.
And that's part of the intimacy that is part of sex, sexuality. So I'm keep coming back to that because this is sex talk with the Siegel brothers.
I got to tell you, most of if you're regular listeners or if our students are listening, as we certainly hope you are, we beg you week in and week out. We rush right from teaching our respective sex and psych classes at Palm Beach State College to come here to the studio and do the show. And on the way out of the classroom this evening, one of his wise-ass students said, what's the topic for the show? And we said, we're talking about seniors and sexuality. And he went, no,
It was like a little confusion.
He said, that's a lie. No, seriously, that's a lie. It's not a lie.
And first of all, the first, again, part of what he also didn't want to believe that older adults are actually having more sex than younger people these days.
Yeah, that's what he
They
said
have more
was a lie.
time.
Right.
Well, there's actually a bunch of
this
reasons.
is
I'm
this is
quoted
true.
recently in a CNN piece when they were talking about that.
But this is a fact.
It's a truth, right?
That older people are having more sex than kids.
It's the
And we've
teenager
always-
thing.
Right.
You know,
I
the
love that.
teenager,
What
the
is that?
senior
Great word.
teenager.
Right, exactly. Right. But the comment that was so great, getting around to it's like, well, no, seniors don't have sex. they can't move their hips.
What's the student's first name?
I'm not going to say.
Well, he should know.
I don't want to embarrass
He's
him.
wrong.
He knows who he is. Right? Oh, yeah, we resoundly corrected that. Right.
You're
But again,
wrong.
as something...
Especially when he put salt in the wound and defined senior. So
Right,
what are you talking
sure.
about? 51, 52, 53? I almost hit him.
I've been doing for many, many years work with seniors and sexuality and intimacy and relationships, and the work that we're doing together is focusing a lot on seniors and intimacy and relationship, and the health benefits of that. You've heard me say before that I love my job. I talk about basically sex and cannabis, and I get to talk about the two best medicines out there.
Oh, but it's so
especially
cool.
for seniors.
I just have to say that, come on, baby boomers. Here we are. We started out with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and here we are, full circle, sex, drugs, and name yours.
Couple of conspicuous changes, though, right?
Well,
We
sure.
went from depressants to antidepressants, from acid to
From acids to
antacids.
antacids.
Right,
Exactly.
there's been some changes,
That's
but
right.
for the most
Yeah,
part,
I've
the theme
seen
has
those internet
changed.
things.
THC to Tylenol PM, right?
Right.
So there definitely, but there certainly is
But
a
still,
revisiting of that. But
yeah.
and I for years, and we get a lot of these things. Even a lot of seniors that come into the programs that we're doing. Hear a lot. It's like, well, I've been having sex for a lot. What, I know everything about this. And then I so love when they come out almost mind blown. They couldn't believe how much they learned that they didn't know.
We saw that when we
That's right.
presented.
That's right.
Wait.
We presented-
Programs that you're doing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did I hear the little bird tell me that one of these programs is coming up sometime soon?
Yes, as a matter of
Is
fact.
it time for a
What a
promo?
sweet little bird.
Promo commercial plug?
Sure. Yes, as a matter of fact, Ann and I on Friday night, March 29th, are doing an event we're
Freddie,
calling
perfect.
1
Thank
Plus
you.
1 Social.
There it
Beautiful. Thank you, Freddie. There's a flyer for it. It's going to be in West Delray.
At the Phoenix.
The Phoenix.
At Delray, 5624 Linton Boulevard. It's the south side of Linton, just west of the hospital.
Yeah, and it's kind of a social gathering, a little networking, just get together, have fun. We'll have some structured activity. We're going to talk a little bit about, debunking some myths about cannabis, but it's really focused more on people connecting, sharing their experiences.
So Larry and I have come up with questions. So we want to stimulate conversation after we do a little bit of talking. So it's the great way to meet somebody when you have a subject about which you can have a discussion and an active discussion. And I think that's part of what's going to distinguish this event. And plus, I've done so many fundraisers for my temple that putting on events that are welcoming to people has become just my style, and that people respond to that. So we like to create Are you coming?
I hope so.
I hope so.
I do hope so.
That's okay.
It's
Add
still-
another one to the list.
It's still not. It's still some calendar finagling that has to happen. But
And I
hope
want
so.
to, if I can make a unilateral decision here,
Sure, go ahead, Larry.
I just want to put this out there because again, it's just something nominal because we have certainly costs. It's if people are interested in registering and signing up ahead of time, it's $15. If people want to show up and pay at the door, that's perfectly fine, but it'll be $20. But I want to throw out there if people come and they're hearing us tonight, if you mention the show,
Absolutely.
we'll give you $5 off at the door.
You get your
right.
$15.
Right. So we'll go ahead and do that. And again, it could be in honor of all of our birthdays. Both of
Yes,
our
we're
birthdays
all-
that weekend.
we're
Yeah,
all
Ricky's
this week.
birthday is
That's right.
tomorrow.
That's
so
crazy.
write in, call
Whole
him,
bunch of
give him happy
Aries in a
birthday
room. I'm
wishes.
surprised the walls aren't blowing out.
That's right. But we're really excited about this event on Friday, and hopefully a lot more to come. So definitely come on out. It'll be fun. You'll learn something, good food, music, meet some good people.
Desserts.
Yes.
Just desserts for
yes.
this one.
A little nosh.
But what you don't know is Larry's going to do some baking. So you definitely want to come, if for no other reason, to get some of what he's going to prepare.
Which I can tell you will be gluten-free, all organic key lime pies.
Oh my God.
Probably
Larry and I used to do these Sex After 60 workshops, like I call them the years PV, pre-Viagra, right? Like in the early 90s at synagogues and churches and senior centers, and it's embarrassing thinking back on it now, how, the conversations changed.
Yeah.
In fact, this is really embarrassing. We would market this program with these, what was this little catchphrase? It's about the dynamics of pleasure, not the mechanics of reproduction. Right? Or just because there's, this was the worst one.
Oh, God,
just because there's snow on the roof. Just because there's snow on the roof.
That was in description, not in marketing. This one's part of marketing.
Just because there's snow on the roof doesn't mean there isn't fire in the hearth. It's like,
But these were the old, the old scripts, the old way to kind of describe it.
Really resistant audiences, right? These were two long-haired, freaky guys coming in to
talking about sex.
But they were always a blast.
Always had fun. And invariably, there was always a 90-year-old guy waiting to talk to us afterwards, just so he can make sure he lets us know he's getting it at least once a week.
Right. Yeah.
So, this idea of older adults being sexual, whether that's in their behavior or just their being, it's not anything new.
Well, isn't what we put in the lecture, that sexuality is part of who we are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a learned behavior, it's an instinct.
Right, it's not what we do, it's what we
are. It's a
Yeah.
need.
Yeah.
That need, again, aside from the instinct for reproduction for the species, it's a need to be held. It's a need to matter.
Well,
it's a psycho physical kind of buffet of benefits.
Right. And that need for that reproductive need, again, for humans it's secondary. We don't have that same biological reproductive imperative that most other animals have, and very much connected to that reproductive imperative. No. It's not reproductive. It's not reproductive.
Well,
the reproductive value is why, again, men are not meant to last very long. So because that is a connection to reproduction. But the point that I want to make is really for humans, especially connected to that reproductive imperative, is that social imperative, is that need to connect, that need to validate. We are not only wired as sexual beings, we're wired as social beings.
That's right.
And we never, ever lose that. And again, as we talk a lot about, from Harlow's experiments to showing how important touch is from jump, from the moment we're born.
That's right.
And we never, ever lose that. So just because somebody is older, or somebody has cognitive declines or dementia or any of a whole host of infirmities, they're still sexual beings who need and desire touch and connection.
It occurred to me driving here, thinking about this, that one of the most horrible tortures of solitary confinement is no touch.
Right.
And isn't it interesting, or no attachment of any kind?
Right.
Interesting, people are starting to realize that that's cruel and inhumane.
That's right.
Yes.
And solitary confinement is starting to be recognized as cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be eliminated.
I can completely understand that.
Right. But again, I'm sure somebody can make the case that if you're talking about a punitive context and application, it's different than kind of what we're talking about, which is more sort of normative, functional, everyday life.
I'm not. Yeah, of course. There are so many seniors. When I go in to a lot of these places, and we're talking about purpose in many cases, and I'll say to them, purpose doesn't have to be grand. You don't have to go out and change the world. You can just change your world right here. So, how many people never leave their rooms here, and they always say, "Oh yeah, there's a lot." Well, oh my goodness. Knock on their door, and put your hand on them, touch,
Absolutely.
say hello.
Absolutely.
Let them know somebody is thinking about them.
Right.
There's so many seniors who are alone, almost like solitary confinement.
Right.
And especially if they're in a facility, an ALF or a nursing home or something like that, a memory care center. But in a lot of different stories, they get out of bed, sit in a chair, which they stay until they go back to bed.
Yeah. And even up to the very end. Do you remember when that conference in Pittsburgh when our favorite Dutch physician, Wout Genatten? Wout was his name. Wout Genatten. Among many other mind-blowing things he shared that day, he started a presentation, a plenary presentation, an opening plenary, so 600-700 sex therapists from all over the world in a room. And before he ever even said a word, he put up a slide with 2 words on it. And every mind in the room just went, poof. The words were palliative sexology.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps.
Right. What do you do when there's nothing you can do?
What are those words doing together? And it was like, light bulbs were just going off all over the auditorium. It was amazing. That even, people think they hear that word, they think end-of-life care, hospice, right? Palliative, keeping comfortable. But if somebody has a partner while they're dying, what better time? Why shouldn't a partner be right there next to them? Even in the bed. I'm not saying having sex, but
just that connection.
A touch. Just go out in each other's arms. Or what a powerful idea.
And look what I've been doing the last couple of years with dementia.
It should happen more often, but so often it's so medicalized and it's this rush to, the beds and the tubes and that's why hospice at home and hospice, God, they have wings on their back.
Right.
Hospice people are just amazing.
But again, even with people with dementia, how many spouses are often punished because they know, and even though their partner may not be able to articulate a specific desire. Well, no, there's recognition in these particular cases. That there's recognition, there's no articulation, but still wanting that contact, that touch. Sometimes it does still include intercourse. So we do a horrible job at sort of navigating these areas of touch and sexuality and intimacy, especially for seniors.
It's deemed dirty.
Right.
And
on the best
they're
of days.
Infantilized. The staff at all these senior facilities infantilize them like they're little children again.
Well, adult children also infantilize.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
That's a big part of it.
And I walk in and go, stand up for your rights. You're not children. Tell them what you want.
Right.
You have a right to know what you want,
That's
And they look at me, they're I'm big for speaking your truth. State your need and then set expectations so people understand what you want. And the seniors need to do that too. There are too many cases in too many homes where they have no privacy.
Yeah, right.
They have their own apartment, but they knock and open the door in one movement.
I work with staff and administrators on that. That's such a big piece.
That is just so disrespectful.
Right. And I think you said something that I want to sort of bring back around, and certainly in the context of what we do and the art of living longer as well. Again, back to the idea of being having purpose, that I think for a lot that confuses people. Right? You know that when you talk to people about purpose, it's like, what does that mean? What kind of purpose? And I think sometimes that is focus. And for a lot of seniors in particular, their purpose could just be embracing the notion that they're still sexual beings, that they still have vitality, that they still have life in them, they still touch and be touched and still have all this to give, that they haven't lost that. And I think even their purpose in owning their well-being, owning that part of themselves and not letting somebody, owning their truth. That, I think, is a deep purpose that a lot of seniors can start with as well. Because people don't think in that way. Right? Again, I've often framed it as among seniors themselves, drinking the Kool-Aid. Drinking the Kool-Aid, thinking just like other people, they're not supposed to want to be sexual. They're not supposed to have desires. They're not supposed to do this.
A lot of that, I think, comes or has come from hard lives. And they get to a place they're tired. And because the understanding that sex is such an important part of life, always, it gets put aside. Too tired. Days become weeks, become months, become years. and love is there. But it's like, oh, you know, go away, that kind of a thing. And that's the saddest thing. That's the Kool-Aid, where they just sort of dwindle into this non-romantic, not even romantic, just cohabitating with love.
Well, sure. I mean, it's, again, those dynamics of a relationship. It's the commitment is there and the intimacy is there, but there's no passion.
But there's
code. Sex therapists hear this line all the time. I love her, or I love him. I'm just not in love anymore. And we know that's universal code. That means nobody's going anywhere, but they're not having sex anymore.
Right.
And they become like roommates, or
absolutely. And there's an element of that process. There's kind of that sort of typical, but I'm not even referring to that. I'm talking about especially people who may not be partnered anymore, who still have a future ahead of them, but there's that default status into not supposed to be interested. Had my relationship, I had my kids, been there, done that.
And again, like you said, the adult kids go, "Oh, mother, please, come on." Because they're dating at your age.
Act your age.
Right.
The adult kids, I think, are largely to blame. This whole idea of not thinking that mom and dad ever have sex. You know, it's just it's so silly,
isn't it? We're sitting right here as evidence.
Yes, that they did.
That they did, but we are in denial.
Hey, wasn't there that one story about the bright star in the east? If it happened then, it could have happened with our mother. That she rest in peace. And died a virgin.
Yes.
And had how many sons?
Well, there were just 3, cosmic accidents, apparently.
Apparently. Does your father corroborate that story?
Dad's probably listening and getting pissed at us right now.
So fortunately, we don't have to prolong the agony for him, since it is that time again. Unfortunately, this goes by so quick.
I hate how fast
it really does. But unfortunately, it's we're going to have to bring this to a close and say goodbye.
Pretty soon, that big guy there is going to start playing the music, and we know what the music means.
That's right.
So before we get there, we will again thank you so much, and it was really so wonderful to meet you. I'm sure we'll have more time together. That you're working with this guy, Ann Goldberg, SavvySeniorServices.com. And, of course, you can reach us here at the show anytime with any questions or comments. Reach us through the Facebook page and watch our old shows on YouTube and tell your friends and family. And join us here next Monday.
Wish him a happy birthday tomorrow.
Go on. And next Monday and every Monday
Larry
at 9 o'clock.
Happy birthday on Sunday.
For Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Happy birthday Monday. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and